Which is in New York.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Department of State. Of course, the President on Friday, after talking with President Medvedev, announced that we had completed work on the START agreement. And we thought that given that historic development, we'd bring to the podium for the first time in her tenure. She's been on the job for about 9 months, but has spent a good deal of time overseas working on missile defense issues, but also in Geneva working specifically on some of the negotiations that led to the historic step last week. So we thought we'd start off the briefing today with bringing Undersecretary for Arms Control International Security Ellen Tauscher to talk a little bit about how we got to this point and where we go from here. Ellen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, PJ.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, PJ, and good afternoon. It is my first time up here. It would have been nice to be here sooner, but I've been in Geneva, as you know, for the past 3 weeks. I'm also headed off to Brussels tomorrow to brief the NAC on START. Before I get into talking to you about the new START treaty, I want to echo President Obama's words about the horrific and tragic events this morning in Moscow. Earlier this morning, I talked to my counterpart, Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov, and expressed my personal condolences to him. Obviously, our hearts and minds are with the people of Moscow and all of those hardworking people going to work that were innocently cut down today on the subway. So this is a very big month for national security issues. President Obama and President Medvedev will sign the New START treaty early next month. On April 12th and 13th, President Obama will host the Nuclear Security Summit, and we expect to release the Nuclear Posture Review in that same time frame. As you know, the Nuclear Posture Review, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Review Conference begins in New York at the UN in May. So that leaves 2 additional pieces in the President's agenda. As you know, President supports the ratification and early entry into force of the CTBT. We have no specific timeline for consideration by the Senate. We're doing our best analysis necessary to determine how to best move the treaty forward. With respect to the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty, we urge the Conference on Disarmament to take up negotiations of the FMCT. We know that an agreement will not be reached either quickly, but we do believe that we must make progress to ban the production of additional material for use in nuclear weapons. The Obama administration is taking these concrete steps because we realize there is no greater threat to the American people than the threat and the spread of nuclear weapons. So let me talk a little bit about the New START treaty for a minute or two, and then I'll let you guys fire away at me. This landmark agreement accomplishes 2 goals. First, it enhances our national security by cutting by about 1/3 the nuclear weapons that both sides are permitted to deploy, and it maintains an effective verification regime appropriate to the obligations in the treaty. It does this while allowing us to retain the nuclear force levels we need to protect our country and our allies. The treaty does nothing to constrain missile defenses either. As I said at the White House on Friday, this treaty is about offensive strategic weapons. Second, it furthers our goal of resetting our relationship with Russia. This treaty shows that the United States and Russia can work together on many issues of mutual interest, including top priorities like nuclear security and nonproliferation. The real issue at hand is that the treaty increases transparency and predictability. The lack of both is too costly and too risky for both sides. As we head toward the NPT review conference in May, the New START treaty demonstrates that the United States and Russia are abiding by the rules of the NPT. We're doing our part to revitalize the nonproliferation treaty. Let me conclude by saying that I look forward to working with the Senate as we seek its advice and consent to ratify the START treaty. Our goal is to submit the treaty in the late spring and to seek ratification by the end of the year. With that, I'll be glad to take a few questions. Yes?
Secretary Bob Burns from AP.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Good, thanks. You just mentioned submitting the treaty to the Senate in late spring. Will the text of the treaty and the protocols be made public before then or after then? And I have a more technical sort of question for you, if you don't mind.
Yes.
On the counting rules for bombers, as described in the fact sheet, it seems to say that the bombers themselves are counted as one warhead each. The warheads themselves appear not to be counted at all, and I'm curious what the rationale is for that. I mean, in the case of the U.S., you have about 500 bombs and missiles that could be associated with the bombers, apparently not counted.
Well, let me go back to the first question, which is how are we going to package everything, and when does it go to the Senate, and what will the public see? Obviously, right now we're going through an important pre-signing notification briefings with our closest allies. And as I said, I'll be going to the NAC tomorrow. Many of our allies are being reached out through our embassies and our networks around the world. This is important to realize that the treaties have three parts. It has the treaty part, the protocol, and the annexes. Both the treaty and the protocol are finished. They're being conformed, as you can imagine, and being scrubbed. The annexes, which are very technical in nature, that really talk to, for example, in the inspection regime and the verification regime, if the decision is made that there are going to be inspections, the annexes talk about how many people arrive on Tuesday, who's going to buy them lunch, how long they can stay, what their duties are, and how they leave. So these are very technical in nature. They're being completed right now in Geneva. We hope to have them completed soon after signing, but certainly by the end of the month, and hope to put the treaty package together for it to go up to the Senate. So the public piece of this that the White House, of course, and the President will be very involved in, and certainly Secretary Clinton and others, the ratification part, will culminate with the completion of all three pieces. So sometime later this month, various parts of the treaty will become public and be part of the debate. Okay. When you talked about heavy bombers, I think it's important to look at these numbers. These numbers are pretty important because they show not only how important this treaty is, but they show that both sides have made commitments to significant reductions. We will limit deployed strategic warheads to 1,550 per side, which is about 30% below the 2,200 maximum that was in the previous Moscow Treaty. There will be a limit of 800 total number of deployed, non-deployed ICBM launchers, SLBM launchers, and heavy bombers. This is 50% below the 1991 START Treaty limits. And another separate limit of 700 on deployed ICBMs, SLBMs, and nuclear-capable heavy bombers. And we have a verification regime that combines elements of START with new elements designed specifically for this treaty. And so we have on-site inspections for both deployed and non-deployed systems, data exchanges, exhibitions, notifies. So this is different than START. It is, I think, the best elements of START. The kinds of questions you're asking, I think we're going to wait for a bigger part of the debate. They're kind of, well, you're asking specifically about heavy bombers.
Yeah, why? What's the rationale for that?
Well, I think what we want to do right now is talk about why this is an important treaty and what the elements of it are. We're going to be talking.
The elements of it, right?
Well, it is part of. It is one of the elements of it. Yes.
But you won't talk about why you took that approach.
Well, it's the approach that we both agreed to. I think that you have to understand that there's heavy bombers on our side, and there's certainly mobile missiles on the Russian side. And what we did was we did everything we could to get an issue of parity so that we knew what we were going to inspect, and we knew that we had the ability to do those inspections in a verification regime that had both transparency and accountability. Yes. Hello, Jill. How are you?
Thank you, Jill Doherty from CNN. I hate to bring you back to the same subject, but missile defense. Just this morning, I was at a briefing over at Brookings, and an expert was quoting the Russians as saying that this treaty does, and I'm not quite sure what word they're using, but link or limit. He seemed to be saying that they interpret it as limit missile defense. Can you just, definitively explain?
I can definitively tell you that I'm kind of an expert, too. I was chairman of Strategic Forces in the House, know a little bit about missile defense, and was certainly there when most of this was discussed and negotiated. As we've talked before, the presidents met in July, and they made it very clear that there is an interrelationship between strategic offensive and strategic defensive weapons. But there is no limit or constraint on what the United States can do with its missile defense systems.
So that definitely the U.S.
Definitely,
can go ahead
positively,
and build
in no
develop.
way, no how. There are no limits to our ability to put the phased adaptive approach forward, and the other systems that we have worked on in the past. Certainly we have our CONUS system in Fort Greely and in Vandenberg, but there's no limit, no constraint. No. Yes.
Lise Labbett with CNN.
Yes, good to see you.
Good to see you. Quick follow-up on that, and then I have a kind of bigger picture question. Do you think that the signing and ratification of this treaty might create a better atmosphere to follow up on a lot of ideas out there for a joint NATO-Russia missile defense system as proposed by some in the U.S.?